found an old man out in the desert between Tonopah and Beatty, Nevada, if in fact this was Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes was one of the richest and most mysterious men in history. He lived in extreme secrecy, trusted almost no one, and left behind an estate worth billions of dollars. He owned planes, movie studios, hotels, and companies. When he passed away, people expected a powerful will to decide everything, but instead, nothing was found. That single fact opened the door to chaos. Strangers came forward with shocking stories. Churches, charities, and distant relatives all waited for answers as courts spent years sorting truth from lies. And while some people walked away with fortunes, others left with nothing but headlines. In the end, the real heirs surprised almost everyone.
This fellow Melvin Dumar is the one who wrote the envelope. These are the same experts who say Howard Hughes wrote the will.
So who truly inherited Howard Hughes's fortune after his death? Here's a list of the lucky individuals. Number 1. The 22 cousins. When Howard R. Hughes Jr. passed away on April 5, 1976, he was one of the richest people in the world. He was known for making great airplanes, important inventions, and movies. He also controlled huge businesses like the Hughes Tool Company and Hughes Aircraft Company. Many people expected that his money and property would go to a big charity he once supported, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, because he gave big assets to it while he was alive. But when he passed away, no valid will was ever found. When someone passes away without a legal will, the law steps in to decide who should inherit the wealth. Since Hughes had no wife, no children, and no surviving parents or siblings, the courts had to search for more distant family members to inherit his estate. That set off one of the most complicated inheritance battles in American history. For years after his passing, hundreds of people claimed to be related to Hughes and asked the courts for part of the estate. They came from all over the United States, and many said they were cousins or distant relatives. There were lawyers, genealogists, experts, and judges, all trying to figure out who was a real blood relative and who was not. The courts used Texas intestacy laws, which decide how property should be divided when a person passes away without a will. Under those rules, blood relatives inherit first, starting with the closest living family members. So after 7 years of hearings, evidence, investigations, and lawsuits, the judges finally reached a decision in 1983. They determined that 22 of Howard Hughes's legal cousins were his closest surviving blood relatives under the law. These 22 cousins became the rightful heirs to his estate under intestacy laws. The estate was enormous, worth about $2.5 billion at the time of Hughes's demise. That would be equal to many billions in today's money. It included land, businesses, cash, oil investments, real estate, and other valuable assets. The courts had to sell some of those assets and settle tax debts and legal costs before the money could be divided. Once that was done, the 22 cousins each received a share based on their legal rights as relatives. These cousins came from different branches of the Hughes family tree. Some of them were from the maternal side of his family, his mother's blood relatives, and some were from his father's side. In some cases, the courts had to decide whether people were true first cousins, second cousins, or more distant relations, and whether their claims were supported by reliable proof, such as birth records or family trees. One of the cousins most often mentioned in public accounts is William Lumis. He was a first cousin of Howard Hughes and was well known both before and after the estate battle. Lumis had not been very close to Hughes during his life, but he became a key figure in settling the estate because he was one of the most direct living relatives. Later, Lumis also served as a trustee of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, linking the institute to the legacy of Hughes's wealth, even though it did not inherit most of the estate directly at that time. The division of the estate among the 22 cousins did not happen overnight. Because Howard Hughes's holdings were so broad and complex, parts of the estate were sold off slowly. For example, properties in Las Vegas and land held for development were not fully settled until decades later. One portion of property known as Summerlin, a large land area near Las Vegas, continued to be developed and sold, and payments to heirs continued even into the early 2000s. Some people think that because these cousins inherited such vast wealth, they immediately became extremely rich and famous. But in reality, the process of selling properties, paying taxes, and dividing profits took time. Parts of the estate were used to pay legal and professional fees, and parts were tied up in ongoing business deals. Still, the cousins did benefit greatly from the inheritance. Even after the first major settlement in 1983, it took years for smaller shares and final distributions to finish. Some of that money was paid as part of separate deals related to properties, development rights, and ongoing business ventures that had started under Hughes's direction. In fact, the last major piece of the estate was not fully resolved until as late as 2010, when a payout was made for interests in the Summerlin property. It is worth noting that not all of Hughes' wealth went to his cousins. Some large portions of the estate went to charities and organizations he had already supported. For example, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute owned stock in Hughes Aircraft Company because he had transferred it to the institute earlier in his life. That stock later sold for billions of dollars and helped make the institute one of the richest scientific research charities in the world. Next on the list is someone who suddenly found himself in the spotlight. Number 2. William R. Lumis. Among all of Howard Hughes' relatives, one man stood out most: William R. Lumis, his first cousin. Lumis did not just inherit from Hughes, he also played a major role in handling Hughes's estate and businesses. William Rice Lumis was born into the Lumis family in Houston, Texas. His mother, Annette Gano Lumis, was Hughes's aunt, the sister of Hughes's mother. Because of this close family tie, Lumis was one of the first living relatives to be recognized by the courts after Hughes passed away. Before the Hughes inheritance battles began, Lumis was a successful lawyer in Houston. He worked for one of the city's most respected law firms, Andrews, Kurth, Campbell, and Jones. There, he built a strong reputation for his legal skills and integrity. However, he had very little personal contact with Hughes during the billionaire's lifetime. In fact, Lumis saw Hughes only a couple of times, and the last time was when Lumis was a boy of 9. At that time, Hughes visited Houston after completing a world flight and stayed with family. That early childhood meeting was one of Lumis's only memories of his famous cousin. When Hughes passed away without a will, Lumis was appointed by the court to help manage the estate. Because of his legal background and his position in the family, the courts named him administrator or co-administrator of the estate in several states, including Nevada, where much of Hughes's money and property were located. Lumis's task was massive. Hughes's holdings were vast, disorganized, and in many cases losing money. Much of the estate was held in Summa Corporation, the main holding company for Hughes' investments in hotels, casinos, mining claims, real estate, and aviation interests. At the time Hughes passed away, Summa was reportedly worth hundreds of millions of dollars, with properties such as the Desert Inn, the Frontier Hotel, and other casinos in Las Vegas. One of Lumis's first goals was to stabilize and reorganize what he could. Under his leadership, Summa sold off many assets that were not performing well. For example, the airline Hughes Air West was sold for tens of millions of dollars, and other businesses that were losing money were shut down or sold. This helped to generate cash to pay debts, taxes, and eventually prepare the estate for proper distribution among heirs. Because the estate was so complicated, it could not be settled quickly. There were multiple lawsuits and legal challenges from various people claiming the right to Hughes's property. Lumis had to handle fights over control of companies, ownership of property, inheritance taxes, and even disputes about whether there were valid wills. These problems went on for years, and Lumis had a major legal and managerial role in nearly all of them. During this long period, Lumis became the public face of the Hughes estate in many ways. People in business and law called him the one person responsible for winding up the vast and tangled affairs that Hughes left behind. Some said he looked and acted like his cousin, calm, careful, and deliberate in business decisions. Others pointed out that he worked tirelessly to protect the estate from bad management and insider opportunism. When the estate was finally divided among the legal heirs in 1983, William Lumis received his portion as one of the 22 cousins. Although public records do not show the exact percentage he received individually, one source from the time of probate administration reports that Lumis received about $2 million from the Nevada portion of the estate alone over several years. That distribution was part of a larger release of about $70 million to cousins and heirs from just the Nevada court's final estate settlement. However, Lumis's role was more than just a beneficiary. Because of his position and experience, he became deeply involved with one of Hughes' most important legacies, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, HHMI. Although the institute had been set up by Hughes earlier in his life and owned significant portions of Hughes's former business interests, control of the institute was contested after Hughes's demise. Lumis pursued legal action to make sure the institute was properly managed and that the intentions behind its founding were carried out. The institute itself grew into one of the richest medical research charities in America, with billions in assets. Because Lumis was both a family member and a legal administrator of the estate, he played an ongoing role in guiding the institute's direction. His involvement helped secure trusteeship and oversight in the years that followed, although later leadership was taken on by other trustees as the organization matured. Beyond his work with the estate and the institute, William Lumis left another mark on Hughes's legacy. He helped establish the Howard Hughes Memorial Award, a prestigious honor in the aerospace industry, recognizing major contributions to aviation. This award reflected the innovative spirit Hughes championed and became part of how the world remembers Hughes's impact in science and flight. Lumis eventually retired from his leadership roles in the estate's affairs and Summa Corporation after many years of service. His work, however, shaped much of what happened to Hughes' wealth and companies after the billionaire's passing. His careful management helped turn an unruly collection of assets into more orderly holdings, ensuring that the legal heirs were paid and that Hughes's name continued to be associated with scientific progress and organized business ventures. The next set of persons might be really shocking. Number 3. The Rupert line. Part of the people who were legally recognized as heirs were 3 women known as the granddaughters of Hughes' uncle Rupert, and 2 relatives connected through Rupert's second wife. These 5 individuals became part of the official group of heirs after lengthy legal proceedings in Houston, Texas. The Harris County Probate Court held a trial in 1981 to decide who among the many claimants was actually entitled to family ties and thus allowed under intestacy laws to receive part of Hughes' estate. In the court's decision, the 3 granddaughters of Rupert Hughes, Agnes Chris Roberts, Elspeth Beth DePould, and Barbara Cameron, were declared to be legitimate heirs and were each awarded 6.3% of Howard Hughes's estate. These sisters were first cousins once removed of Hughes through his paternal uncle Rupert, who was a noted novelist and screenwriter. Chris Roberts, Beth DePould, and Barbara Cameron did not have much direct connection with Howard Hughes while he was alive. In fact, Chris Roberts once said she had never even met Hughes in her lifetime. Beth once said she had seen him just once in New York when an elevator door opened and there he was. But they did not get into the elevator together. Barbara said she was introduced to him one time in a restaurant in Los Angeles by her grandfather Rupert. The sisters spent many years fighting other relatives in court to prove they were legitimate members of the Hughes family and had a right to inherit. At the trial, there were competing arguments and legal challenges. Some claimants tried to challenge the sisters' legitimacy by questioning the lineage connection through Rupert. The sisters, however, presented genealogical evidence and family records that convinced the jury that they were true heirs. Each of these three women, Chris, Beth, and Barbara, was granted a significant portion of the estate, which was conservatively estimated at several $100 million at the time of the decision. Based on the court's ruling, each of the sisters' shares was said to be worth around $32 million when the estate's assets were being distributed. These shares were life-changing amounts for them, considering none had been wealthy or widely known before the inheritance. Chris Roberts lived in Cleveland and worked at a skating rink before she inherited her share. She joked that she might use the money to buy the rink she worked at and burn it down. Beth DePould lived in San Francisco and was married to an engineer, while Barbara Cameron lived in Los Angeles and was married to a real estate broker. None of the three sisters had spent their lives in the spotlight before the inheritance case. In addition to these three sisters, the court also recognized two other people connected to Rupert Hughes, Avis Hughes McIntyre, and the heirs of her brother, Rush Hughes. Avis and Rush were not blood granddaughters of Rupert. They were the children of Rupert's second wife, Alice Adelaide, from her earlier marriage. Although they were not formally adopted by Rupert, a legal agreement was reached that included them in a shared plan for the estate distribution. Avis Hughes McIntyre, at the time of the trial, was about 80 years old and living in Montgomery, Alabama. She claimed a share of the Hughes estate based on her association through Rupert's family and the legal agreements made between different heirship groups. The court awarded her 4.75% of the estate. This share was a smaller percentage than the sisters' shares, but still a large sum in absolute financial terms. Rush Hughes, the brother of Avis, had also claimed part of the inheritance. Rush passed away in 1979 before the final rulings were completed, but his estate continued his claim through his heirs. Like Avis, the heirs of Rush were awarded 4.75% of Hughes's estate. This meant that both families connected through Rupert's second wife received equal shares under the legal settlement. The portion of the estate given to these five heirs, the three sisters, Avis McIntyre, and the heirs of Rush, came from the paternal side of the family. There had been heavy debate and many competing claims from hundreds of distant relatives, but the jury in Harris County ultimately selected the closest relatives under Texas intestacy law. These relatives became major beneficiaries because they were judged to have closer blood connections. Meanwhile, there's the question of Hughes's spouse. What did they get? Number 4. The two ex-wives of Howard Hughes. Despite all his achievements, Howard Hughes' personal life was complicated, especially his marriages. Hughes married only twice in his life, and both of those marriages ended in divorce long before his passing in 1976. He had no children from either marriage. The first woman Howard Hughes married was Ella Botts Rice. Ella was from a well-known family in Houston, Texas. Her family was connected to Rice University, one of the leading schools in Texas. Hughes met her when he was still a young man and was just beginning to make his name in business and Hollywood. Hughes and Ella were married on June 1, 1925. At that time, Hughes was only 20 years old. He had recently inherited a large part of his father's business, including the Hughes Tool Company, which made tools used in the oil industry. The marriage seemed like a union of two promising young people, a wealthy young man and a well-connected young socialite. Soon after the wedding, the couple moved to Los Angeles, California, where Hughes hoped to start a career in filmmaking. He produced his first movie, Swell Hogan, during this period, and Ella supported him in his early attempts at making movies. However, the marriage did not last long. Hughes quickly became absorbed in his work. His business interests, and a life filled with glamorous women and social pressures. Ella felt isolated and unhappy in Los Angeles. After 4 years of marriage in 1929, she returned to Houston and filed for divorce. They never had children together. The divorce ended their legal relationship, and Ella went on with her life independently. Because the divorce occurred so long before Hughes's demise, she was not his spouse when he passed, and therefore was not legally entitled to receive his estate under the laws of inheritance. After his divorce from Ella Rice, Howard Hughes lived a very public life filled with relationships and romances with many famous actresses. But the one woman he married second was Jean Peters, a Hollywood actress whose life and marriage to Hughes would attract wide attention. Jean Peters was born Elizabeth Jean Peters on October 15, 1926, in East Canton, Ohio. She became a movie star in the late 1940s and early 1950s, appearing in films for 20th Century Fox. Peters was known for her natural beauty and her preference for roles that were not just glamorous or purely sexualized. She wanted to be respected as a serious actress. Hughes and Peters knew each other long before their marriage. There were rumors of romance even before she became famous. Meanwhile, their relationship lasted many years with periods of being apart and together. On January 12, 1957, Hughes and Jean Peters were married in a small hotel in Tonopah, Nevada. Their marriage was different from most Hollywood romances. Instead of glamorous parties and public life together, it was quiet and private. Peters retired from her acting career soon after they married. She stepped away from life in front of the camera and chose to live the life that Hughes preferred, private and controlled. Despite being married, the couple did not live a typical life together. Hughes was already becoming more reclusive, and the two were often separated. At times, they lived in different cities or homes. By the late 1960s, they were increasingly distant. After about 14 years of marriage, their relationship ended in 1971. Peters filed for divorce, and the court granted it. As part of her settlement, she was guaranteed a lifetime alimony payment of $70,000 per year, adjusted for inflation. This income was secure and designed to take care of her financially for the rest of her life. Importantly, she waived all claims to Hughes's estate, meaning she gave up any legal right to receive a share of his wealth after his demise. By choosing alimony instead of pressing for a share of Hughes's fortune, Jean Peters protected herself from the legal battles that followed Hughes's passing. She did not want to be part of the complicated inheritance fights or go through years of court proceedings, so she trusted the alimony agreement and maintained her privacy. Neither Ella Rice nor Jean Peters was legally Hughes's spouse at the time of passing. That means Ella Rice and Jean Peters did not inherit part of the estate under the final legal ruling. Instead, most of the estate went to distant relatives, including the group of cousins identified in the probate process. However, both women did receive financial benefits earlier through their divorce agreements long before Hughes passed away. There was one document, the much-talked-about Mormon will, discovered after Hughes's passing, that claimed he left money to both ex-wives. That document listed $156 million to be split between Ella and Jean. But the court later declared it a forgery and rejected it in 1978, so it never stood as a valid legal will. After her divorce from Hughes, Ella Rice lived quietly and out of the public eye. She did not have the money that would have come from Hughes's inheritance, but her life before and after the marriage was privately supported by her own family connections. Jean Peters, on the other hand, lived a long life after her divorce. She kept her focus on stability and her future, rather than on joining legal fights over Hughes's estate. She passed away in 2000 in California. But that's not where the battle ends. Things were about to get much worse. Number 5. Melvin Dummar and Terry Moore. Over the next several years, many people claimed they were entitled to some part of Howard Hughes's estate. Among the most publicized of these claimants were Melvin Earl Dumar and actress Terry Moore. These individuals' claims became famous because of how unusual they were and because they revealed how chaotic the estate battles had become. Melvin Earl Dumar was born on August 28, 1944, in Cedar City, Utah. He worked various jobs in his life, including as a truck driver, gas station owner, and frozen meat salesman. He attracted world attention in the years after Hughes's demise by claiming that Howard Hughes had left him a written share of the billionaire's estate. Dumar told a remarkable story. He said that in December 1967, long before Hughes's life ended, he was driving in the desert of Nevada when he found a disheveled, injured man lying by the road. He claimed that the man asked him for a ride to Las Vegas and that he drove him to the Sands Hotel, where the man introduced himself as Howard Hughes. According to Dumar, this man thanked him, but never revealed his identity again. After Hughes's demise in 1976, Dumar claimed a mysterious envelope was delivered to his gas station by a stranger. He said the envelope contained a handwritten document purporting to be Hughes's last will and testament. This document came to be known as the Mormon Will because it was filed for probate at the headquarters of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City, Utah. The will allegedly left 1/16 of Hughes's estate, about $156 million, to Dumar. It also supposedly left the same amount to the Mormon Church and shares to charities, ex-wives, and aides. However, the will contained many strange details, such as misspellings, incorrect names, and references that did not match Hughes's known preferences or life. For example, it called Hughes's famous giant airplane the Spruce Goose, a name Hughes himself disliked. Dumar said he didn't open the letter at first, but later acknowledged that he had opened it and seen the contents. His fingerprints were found on the envelope. A Nevada jury reviewed the document during a long and highly public trial and concluded that the Mormon will was a forgery. The court ruled that Hughes had passed away without any valid will, and Dumar therefore had no legal claim to any share of the estate. Despite the ruling, Dumar continued to fight in court for many years. He filed additional lawsuits even into the 2000s, claiming that new evidence supported his story. In 2008, a federal appeals court upheld the decision that the earlier trial had been fair and that the will was a fake. Dumar's legal efforts finally ended without any portion of Hughes's estate in his hands. Throughout his life, Dumar maintained that he had genuinely encountered Howard Hughes in the Nevada desert and that the will was authentic. His remarkable story inspired the 1980 film Melvin and Howard, which dramatized his claims and life journey. Yet, despite the fame and attention, he never received the money he sought. Next was Terry Moore, a well-known American actress who appeared in films from the 1940s onward. After Hughes's demise, she famously claimed that she had been secretly married to Howard Hughes in 1949, aboard a yacht in international waters off Mexico. Moore said the ceremony was real and that she had not divorced Hughes. If true, this marriage could have entitled her to a share of his estate as his surviving spouse. Moore wrote about her relationship and her belief that she had been his wife in a memoir titled The Beauty and the Billionaire. Her claim attracted major media attention because a secret marriage would have had significant legal impact. However, Moore never produced valid evidence of the marriage, such as a marriage certificate, witnesses, or official records. When the disputes over Hughes's estate were being resolved under Texas law, courts looked at Moore's claim and found that there was no legally valid marriage between her and Hughes at the time of his passing. Because of this, her claim to the estate was rejected. Some settlement reports indicate that the estate later paid her a sum of money outside the main legal inheritance process. The payment appears to have been a negotiated amount to resolve public claims and disputes, not a legal inheritance. Moore's story remains one of the most controversial and talked about aspects of the Hughes estate saga. Although she was never legally recognized as a spouse in the eyes of the probate courts, the public fascination with her claim added dramatic attention to the long legal battles after Hughes left the world. The Mormon will was not the only purported will that surfaced after Hughes passed. Over 30 different documents claiming to be wills appeared in different places. The Mormon will was the most publicized because it named specific beneficiaries. But judges and lawyers quickly found problems with many of these documents: inconsistencies, impossible clauses, wrong dates, and suspicious origins. A Nevada state court jury took 7 months of testimony before ruling the Mormon will a fraud in 1978. After the will was thrown out, the courts declared that Hughes had passed away intestate, meaning with no legally valid will. That set off years of probate litigation among hundreds of people who claimed to be relatives or had supporting stories. In American law, inheritance depends on either a valid will or clear legal ties under intestacy laws. Because the courts ruled that the Mormon will was forged and that Hughes left no valid will, all claims like Dumar's were treated as unsubstantiated. People like Terry Moore failed to prove the legal status needed to become heirs, so their cases did not survive probate litigation. For decades, aspiring claimants tried different strategies: submitting documents, changing stories, producing witnesses, or launching lawsuits. But the central legal fact remained. No legally binding testamentary document survived scrutiny. Therefore, billions of dollars were distributed by Texas law to blood relatives, while most sensational personal claims faded away in courts. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.